Hello. This is my this isn't a podcast. This is my YouTube video. My name is Ada, and I'm gonna go over Texas incarceration laws and legislator and opinions and different cool facts about our prison system in Texas. So, there has been a bunch of research on the effects of people sending people to jail for things, especially for things like nonviolent crimes. For low-income Texans, tickets for minor offenses are a really big issue because they can lead to counterproductive consequences for the individual and for the social and economic welfare of the state. Reasons for that are that tickets, I don't know if you've ever gotten a ticket. I definitely have. They're sometimes incredibly expensive. Sometimes they're not at all. But regardless, if you don't pay them, they compound over time. So they get larger. There are fees for missing deadlines, failing to pay or appear in court can also lead to arrest warrants, and then jail time. Current state practice is usually the suspension of a driver's license, or if you ever try to, if you have an unpaid ticket, an outstanding unpaid ticket, you may not be able to register your vehicle. So this is bad. Some people believe that this is bad because it places a person in jail, and it can lead to loss of employment and housing, and a lot of times it is a one-time issue. So yeah, more issues is that it makes it suspending driver's licenses makes it illegal for somebody to get to work, and that sounds really obvious, but it just complicates the issue more, and sort of, when they're trying to, pay their bills and pay, for example, pay this bill. They can't earn their wages because they may not. It makes it harder for them to earn their wages because they're not able to get to work in their vehicle. Arrest warrants make it difficult for people even just find employment, and lower income Texans are kind of driven deeper into poverty because they're sort of set up in this cyclical cyclical system where, when they get one ticket, everybody, has gotten a ticket here or there, and they get a ticket, they're unable to pay it, and so they have higher fines for paying it, and the theory is that being poor is very expensive, and that only just kind of reiterates that. The economic issue of this is that it drains public resources too, and it's at the taxpayer's expense. So the current system has also violated state and federal law. So there was a Supreme Court case, Tate versus Short, in 1971. Indigent citizen was convicted of unpaid traffic offenses. Really quick, indigent is a word for poor and needy. I had to look that up just in case some of you don't know what that is. Indigent means poor and needy. So an indigent citizen convicted of unpaid traffic offenses. The Texas law stated that this person unable to pay could be temporarily incarcerated for sufficient time to pay their fines. So it was $5 a day. So basically they're temporarily incarcerated, and each day they're paying off their fines. And it was priced at $5 a day, which basically meant that this person would have been incarcerated for 3 or so months. The federal law actually declared that it was unconstitutional, basically stating that the fee should be waived and that jail time should only be punishment for reoccurring offenses. That jailing someone for a one-time offense who could not afford to pay was unconstitutional. the United States Supreme Court held that incarcerating somebody because of unpaid fines or fees without a hearing to determine if they're able to pay the fines and fees violates the equal protection and due process clauses of the 14th Amendment. Basically, you have to have a hearing. Can this person afford to pay the fee for this? If they can't, is that really something that we need to hold above their head? It isn't. It's unconstitutional, and it violates the 14th Amendment. And then historical reasons for why incarceration in Texas, the rates in the prison population in Texas is very large. Well, actually, it's pretty big. We'll go over that later. But the prison population in Texas between the mid-1970s and the early 2000s boomed because there weren't really many proven alternatives to incarceration. And there was a lot of prison construction at that time and a lot of operation costs, consuming criminal state justice budgets, and as more money went into the prisons, less and less money was left for probation and other alternatives to incarceration. In recent events, in June, there was a Senate bill passed by the Texas legislature, and it was designed to prevent people convicted of low-level crimes from being sent to jail when they can't afford a fine or fees. This kind of loops back to what we were talking about earlier. State Senator Judith Zaffirini said the purpose is to keep Texas jails from acting as debtors' prisons. The more you owe, the more you're in prison. Last year, Texas made alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders and more available and effective. So if you're a nonviolent offender, then you were diverted to parole instead of prison, or you were more likely diverted to parole instead of prison, and we began taking advantage of advancements in technologies, which basically meant that we could start electronically monitoring people with drug addictions and we did more research and sought more non-narcotic treatment for opioid addictions, for rehabilitation, and that kind of thing. Within the last decade, Texas closed 3 prisons and the crime rate dropped 26%. Last year, there was a group called the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. They executed strikes in 7 major prisons. They demanded dignified legislation that would change the slave-like conditions, unpaid labor. Texas has unpaid labor in prison, and inhumane living conditions in prisons in Texas. There are a lot of polarizing opinions on this subject. I've covered a couple. This first one is pretty interesting. It's called the criminogenic theory, which is basically this increasing supported view by criminal psychologists. The theory is that it's possible to reduce reoffending rates by treating or rehabilitating offenders rather than just simply punishing them. This is kind of been adopted in Denmark. There's a lot of really positive feedback that has come from more research and more implementation of this theory. Let's see. The Democratic viewpoint is that crime should be more easily remedied with preventional community action. Democrats are pretty much not necessarily anti-death penalty, but most believe that it shouldn't be an arbitrary punishment. Texas has the death penalty. Democrats are also very, very much for prison reform. Republicans have traditionally supported stricter sentencing for major crimes. The belief that some crimes should not provide parole eligibility is pretty big, and capital punishment is the belief that capital punishment should be enforced is also a large opinion for Republicans. The theory also that criminals behind bars cannot harm the general public is mostly, I don't know. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. It is mostly agreed upon by most Republicans. But I will say that recently during the Obama administration, Republicans were more open to prison reform. U.S. earns the most incarcerated country in the world award. We are followed by China and Russia. Texas, as far as state incarceration, is number 5 on the list, which is pretty high. Louisiana is actually the number 1 state. And Denmark holds the lowest prison rates. Prisoners in Denmark are generally granted kind of dignity. They are allowed to wear whatever they want. They make their own food. It's understood that there's going to be, some conflict. It's more hands-off approach. It's just a kind of more laid-back, more dignified environment. There's lower violence and suicide in the Denmark prisons. And the recidivism, sorry, I'm butchering that word. I cannot say it for some reason, but recidivism rates are extremely low, which is what I was talking about earlier. It's just the chance that somebody, when they leave prison, are going to become a reoffender. So most people in Denmark prisons, when they are released, do not become reoffenders. And as far as Texas, Governor Greg Abbott really hasn't addressed the issue of prison reform in Texas. And President Trump really has kind of vocalized sort of bombastic statements on enforcing more law. So he's more leaning on the side of stricter prison reform. But yes, so that is it. Thank you for watching, and I will post my questions in the body of the post. Thanks.